Welcome to Screencast 1 in a series of screencasts for this legal research class covering state cases, finishing up state cases, covering enacted law, and legislative history. This is for our legal research class meeting on October 29th, this fall 2013. I'm presenting it. Again, the Screencast 1 will cover finishing case law, including finding cases through the New Mexico Bar Bulletin and using citators review. How to find cases. We covered in the last class finding cases through the New Mexico Compilation Commission. We covered finding slip opinions, appellate reports, unpublished decisions. That's the direct New Mexico Compilation Commission website. You can also find cases through the site, the database called New Mexico OneSource. It is the official site for finding cases and statutes in New Mexico. There are also subscription databases like Lexis and Westlaw, and you can also use FastCase. We explored a little bit into finding cases through FastCase as well. Again, in this class, we'll be using FastCase website directly. You can also find cases using the New Mexico statutes annotated through New Mexico OneSource, but you can also do that in print. Remember that you can find cases through annotations like in American Law Reports or the Federal Digest. Remember that you can use the Federal Digest when no New Mexico case law is available because, again, we're not a very litigious state. You can use the New Mexico Digest. You use it like the Federal Digest because it's organized in the same way because it's published by West. Again, you can also find New Mexico cases using annotated codes not just on OneSource. You can search Lexis, Westlaw, and FastCase as well for annotated codes. The annotations will be a little different sometimes. All of them, including FastCase, will provide annotations for case law. Searching New Mexico OneSource and FastCase as well as Lexis and Westlaw for cases and statutes. And you can also find things through bar bulletins. Here's an example of what the New Mexico Bar Bulletin looks like. If you go to the New Mexico Bar's website, it's nmbar.org, and if you go to under attorneys and members at the sort of top of the page, scroll down to where it says Bar Bulletin, click on Bar Bulletin, and they will give you archives, Bar Bulletin archives of past issues as well as current issues for 2013. So if we look at the issue that just came out this past week for 10/23 and we click in there, we can actually see a digital copy of what the Bar Bulletin looks like. Bar Bulletins, once you become attorneys, you'll get periodic updates of what the law is within your jurisdiction. You can peruse them at least once a month as another way to find these cases and changes in rules. Every jurisdiction of which you become a bar member has a mechanism of updating you. Most are still in print. This one's online. The drawback is that they don't give you it's necessary, I'll always give you the text of the cases, just the citations. This one does with some text of the cases, but at least it may not give you all, but it will give you oftentimes the full text of the cases, if not a citation. But now you know that you can go to New Mexico Compilation Commission, and oftentimes you can get the slip opinions as well as any other advanced opinions, and you can also get full text, and they post them very currently as well. Okay? If you look at this bar bulletin inside this issue, it gives you a table of contents. Okay? It lets you know what you need to read about. It may give you any judicial investitures. This one doesn't really have one, but it'll have CLE planners in this one. It'll give you text from cases from the New Mexico Court of Appeals. Scrolling forward, this table of contents will give you lists of meetings. It'll give you writs of cert, right? It'll give you notices. Scrolling in here too, if you scroll forward, here are your writs of cert, okay? It'll give you cites for opinions, both published and unpublished, clerk certificates, recent rulemaking activity. So I found out about the recent rule regarding the New Mexico citation rule by looking in this recent rulemaking activity because I read the bar bulletin every time it comes out. And then here are your advanced opinions. You can get them through the bar bulletin, or in our case, right now the advanced opinions are often posted really quickly on the New Mexico Compilation Commission's website as well. Okay. So How about updating these cases? You need to make sure that they're still good law, and you can also do some very efficient legal research by just using your citators. Again, your citators are Keysight and Shepard's, right? And remember, updating with your citators will give you prior and subsequent history, okay? I'm not sure that everybody understands the difference between these when you pull it up. Prior is before, subsequent is after. Let's take a look at this actually when you go into Shepard's and Keysight, okay? Let's pull up this case. This case is Lefkowitz v. Newsom. It's a Supreme Court case, came out in 1975. It's a pretty decent example because it has examples of how you might Keysight in Westlaw. Now, currently, Westlaw Next, the Keysight report is actually tabbed out, as you can see at the top of the screen under the title where it says Lefkowitz v. Newsom. You see that, in effect, the Keysight report is actually tabbed out, filings, negative treatment, history, citing references, and table of authorities. If you tab to, I'm going to tab over filings because that's not really part of the Keysight report. If you tab to negative treatment, it'll actually show you how the document has been negatively impacted by events or decision in the same litigation or proceedings, or sometimes other litigation or proceedings. So in this one, there's no negative direct history, so it wasn't necessarily overruled. There wasn't any evidence of subsequent history. Negative direct history is evidence of subsequent history, how it was treated after, okay? Negative citing references, right below it where it says negative citing references 7, is how it was treated after by different cases that analyze this case, okay? It's not the same, it's not a sort of chain of the same cases in terms of what happened later. Was it appealed? Was it overruled? These are other cases that interpret or analyze this Lefkowitz v. Newsom case. So what Westlaw characterizes as most negative history would be Lugo v. Artis, okay? Lugo v. Artis declined to extend, so they declined to follow the reasoning and extend the reasoning of the Lefkowitz case because they didn't feel maybe that the facts were similar enough, say, okay? Then they have other cases that distinguished Lefkowitz from their situation in their case. So Hicks v. Oliver distinguished, all right? How about prior history? What's prior history? Prior history is everything that happened in the same chain of events for the Lefkowitz case. So what happened prior? Okay, so prior to this, there was a case U.S. ex rel. Newsom v. Malcolm. Okay, that happened and occurred out of the Second Circuit. So if you click on this history tab, you can see what happened prior and how the case got to where it was at the end in terms of being decided by the Supreme Court. Okay, so it came up through the Second Circuit, cert was granted, and then the Supreme Court heard on it and ruled as such, okay? Citing references. Citing references, again, it's part of, sometimes cases in the negative treatment, in terms of the this negative treatment tab will appear in citing references because citing references are cases that have cited the case either negatively, positively, in any way that you've pulled up. So other cases that have cited to the Lefkowitz case, all right? We see that Lugo v. Artis again. We see a Worth v. Bell case again. That's a negative treatment. I'm not sure why it didn't appear in the negative treatment tab, but it was distinguished by, maybe because it wasn't totally distinguished in a totally negative way. We'd have to actually read it. If you look under depth of treatment on the left-hand side of the page, or on the right-hand side where you can see the green bars, it'll show you how much they discuss the Lefkowitz case in the Lugo v. Artis case or the Worth v. Bell case, okay? And then it'll even show you head notes. So if you have a particular head note that you know it relates to, and this one is in terms of habeas and then key number that they've equated to it, indictment and plea, you can see every single case that has that particular head note point so you can hook into it. It's just another way that you can look into it. And then they'll even tell you the type of documents you're looking at. Are you looking at cases? Are you looking at petitions? Are you looking at briefs? Right? And then they tell you dates as well. If you tab over to Table of Authorities in this top menu bar for that basically constitutes KeyCite, tabbing over to Table of Authorities. Table of Authorities, as this sort of light yellow box explains, is a listing of cases relied upon as authority by the document you're reviewing. Okay, so you can use the list to quickly verify the validity of relied upon authority. So that's pretty useful as well. If you go over to, say, Lexis Advance and type in your site, Lefkowitz v. Newsom even recognizes it, search and look up that case, you haven't Shepardized it yet, but you're looking up the case here and you can already see some Shepard type treatments in here. So caution, possible negative treatment. Not surprising, we already saw a little bit of it and got a heads up about that through the KeyCite report. Okay, if you want to Shepardize it, instead of KeyCiting, here we're dealing with the Shepard's citator. You click on the Shepard's button, Shepardize button on the top right of the page. And that will help you update this case to see if it's still good law and so forth. And this Shepard's report looks a little bit different. This gives you appellate history. Was it appealed further? No, because it got up to the Supreme Court decided it, and there you go. But you can see the sort of prior history. If you look under prior history under where it says appellate history. There's no subsequent, but there is prior history. So that's the way Lexis's Shepard's report breaks it down. Notice that they've sort of followed suit with how KeyCite displays things, and they've started tabbing things out as well. They give citing decisions. If you click on the tab where it says citing decisions, you'll get decisions that have actually cited to the Lefkowitz case. Okay? They'll say cited by, citing and dissenting opinion. And then they'll give you can also tab over, if you look at the, if you look at the left-hand side of the page, you can narrow things by the type of analysis, cautionary, positive, and neutral. Let's look under caution and see what it says. So far, they note with their sort of little color-coded squares that it's been distinguished by. I'm not seeing any more cautionary or sort of red squares that maybe would be associated with something like decline to extend. So if you compare the report in Westlaw Next, decline to extend, Lugo v. Artis, versus the report in Shepard's, they do differ a little bit. I don't see that Lugo case anywhere. So you need to be aware that you need to compare and contrast different types of citators because it's important, because as you can see, there are big differences. So do both, okay? You can request both when you're attorneys. You can just email the reference desk and say, I want a KeyCite report or I want a Shepard's report, whatever your firm doesn't have. You can request both, okay? So it can be really easy. You just need to know that that's what you need to do. Remember that Shepard's also tabs further into tables of authorities, just like Westlaw does, and citing law reviews and treatises. So they'll give you secondary sources that actually cite to the Lefkowitz case, all right? So that can be helpful as well. They give you statutes as well, annotated statutes, law reviews and periodicals, and so forth. It looks pretty useful. So again, updating with your citators, you can use Shepard's or KeyCite. It can give you prior or subsequent history. It can give you awareness of negative treatment, such as overruled, whether the case has been overruled. You can also use this. You can use citators on statutes, and we'll go into that when we get to statutes. And you can locate other citing documents, like other similar cases and analysis and secondary sources. So Screencast 1, again, has covered case law, including finding cases through the New Mexico Bar Bulletin and updating cases and using citators. Next up, we're going to get to Screencast 2, which will cover enacted law, including official and unofficial codifications. Stay tuned.